Welcome to Adapted, the podcast where we explore adaptations of various forms. I'm today's host, Tom, and with me is...
Matt?
All right, so today I put together a few eyewitness accounts of plays in Shakespeare's time, both things written and drawn. And so some of these we may have touched on before, some of these are certainly new, but it seems the earliest eyewitness account that survives of Shakespeare's plays was from 1592 and from the novelist, one of the first novelists ever, Thomas Nash, who mentions Henry VI Part 1. So the first recorded attention of this was Henry VI Part 1, which he wrote about in 1592. And there's a character in that named Talbot, who's like a hero who dies. And Nash mentions that at least 10,000 spectators cried because of his death, the death of Talbot, indicating that the play might have been more popular than anybody who's read it could have predicted.
Not that one.
Yeah, no. So apparently, we don't have a lot of records of this, but this is how we know this was an early play, because Nash mentions it, even though he does not mention Shakespeare by name. The first-hand account we have of that is a little later, 1596, Lord John Harrington. He hired a bunch of actors to come to his house in Rutland and perform Titus Andronicus.
Why are they just getting the awful? I guess because they're early.
Yeah, I suppose so. I guess it was early, and we have an account of that from a French tutor who wrote about it in French. That was another thing. We also have an account by 1598. This is not a first-hand account, but this is a common book written by Francis Mears, he was the professor who said that by this point Shakespeare was being compared to Plautus and Seneca. Like, he was Plautus and Seneca in one person. And this is even before his great plays were written. So apparently he had that kind of reputation. But we also have a account from September 21st, 1599, from John Plater the Younger, who's a Swiss-born doctor, who had in his diary, we have his diary, an account of him crossing the Thames to go to the Globe to see Julius Caesar. And we have a really kind of detailed account of what it is like to actually go to the Globe, to go to it. And he says that on December 21st, I'll paraphrase a little bit of this because it's long, that after lunch at about 2 o'clock, I and my party crossed the water, and there, to the house with the thatched roof, witnessed an excellent performance of the tragedy of the first Emperor Julius Caesar, with a cast of some 15 people. When the play was over, they danced very marvelously and gracefully together, as they wont, two dressed as two men and two as women. So there was apparently, that's how we know they danced at the end, that two men and two women would dance together. He also gives an account of what the playhouse looked like. So he gives the account of the raised platforms of the stage. That's just how we know about that everyone had a good view. He mentions there are different galleries and places where the seating is better and more comfortable and therefore more expensive. You only have to pay 1 English penny to stand below. So this is how we know about the groundlings and the cost of admission. But if he wishes to sit, he enters by another door and pays another penny, so 2 pennies, while he desires to sit in the most comfortable seats, which are cushioned, where he not only sees everything well, but can also be seen. Then he pays yet another English penny at another door. Food and drink are carried round the audience, so anybody can buy refreshments during the play. And he also gives an account that the costumes were very nice. They were given to the actors by lords or knights. And so we have a nice little account of the theater experience from this man. We also have some accounts indirectly of what it was like. There's Tom Middleton's play The Puritan, where he mentions how Macbeth was staged, the ghost scene with Banquo was staged, where in the play they mention that the ghost in the white sheet who sits at the upper end of the table. So how did they show Banquo was a ghost? They put a white
Put a
sheet on
sheet on him.
him. Yep. So I don't know where that tradition started. I kind of hope it was here. And that was mentioned again in the Night of the Burning Pestle, where they give a kind of different staging, where apparently Banquo was sitting in Macbeth's seat when he stood up, but whatever, same thing. Um, we also have again that diary of John Manningham. That was the guy who recorded the story of William before Richard III, William the Conqueror before Richard III, that we talked about, I think, last week. And he mentions he saw a special version of Twelfth Night at the Middle Temple in 1602, which the Middle Temple was a law school. And he thought the grief Olivia felt for her brother was a little over the top. We have other accounts from Henry Jackson, who traveled or who was part of a group that hired the king's men to come up to Oxford in 1610 to put on Othello. And we have his account of Desdemona. So this is a boy playing Desdemona. And he wrote, "She implored the pity of the spectators by her very face." And end quote. And so in these accounts, you see like there is no kind of weirdness about a boy is playing Desdemona. That apparently she did a good job. She inspired a lot of tears. Um, we also have a first-hand account of a letter from a diplomat, Sir Henry Wotton, to his nephew, and he was in the audience who saw the production of Henry VIII in 1613 that burned down the globe. And so we have the full account of how it happened. It's apparently the scene where Henry comes into Wolsey disguised for a mask, that they fired a cannon and it set the whole thing on fire.
I love even my 7-year-old son, he's in first grade right now, and he came home and they covered Shakespeare in his class like 2 weeks ago. They talked about Shakespeare, but and I'm like, oh, tell me what you learned about Shakespeare. And he knew a little bit. He's like, oh, they had to take the theater apart and make it again. I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. And he goes, and then they burned it down because they let off a cannon during one of the shows. And he goes, why would they do that? And he goes, isn't this like a wooden building? And he goes, they said it had a straw roof. Why would you light up a cannon in there? And I go, it's a really bad play. They needed to jazz it up a
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. The only other account we have in words from that time is a German prince named Louis Frederick Württemberg came over to see Othello at the Globe in 1610. And according to his account, it apparently was a thing, like when you visit England, you go to the Globe, which I guess is true again today. I guess it was that popular by 1610 that people from Germany would be like, no, you have to go to the Globe and see it, if you had the means to do that. In terms of visuals, I thought this was interesting. So the globe burns down, as we just said, in 1613. I found two illustrations of it from after 1613. One from, I think, 1637, one from 1647, I believe. And they're all exteriors. They're looking at the globe. They're a cityscape, and you could see the globe there. There is one internal picture of a theater at the time before the globe was burned down. We actually have no illustrations of it from the inside, pre 1613 or even after. The one illustration we have of any of these theaters is a drawing of the Swan, which was a theater that apparently was very similar to the Globe. It was modeled after the Globe. And this was done by a visiting Dutch artist named Johannes de Witt, who sent it to his friend Arenat van Busche, who copied it. And then what we have is the copy. Apparently, Busche lost the original picture, and all we have is a copy of the original picture that isn't even of the globe. It's of the swan. And so the only picture we have of the globe, which is kind of the basis of a lot of how modern productions that want to do like the original style, like the Globe in England, is based on this one picture that isn't even of the globe, and it isn't even the original picture. It's a copy of it. We have a lot more interiors of the indoor theaters because Inigo Jones designed for them, and he made a lot of illustrations, and a lot of those haven't even changed that much, so they're not that different. But that I thought was wild that we have this one picture, and that's what it's based off of. The last thing I'll say, because it's a weird one, is a drawing of a scene from Titus Andronicus by Henry Peacham. Henry Peacham was a Renaissance poet, and we found a random picture in a book with verses from Titus Andronicus that he just drew, there is a code in it that is a date, and they think the date is 1595. So this would be contemporary with Shakespeare. And the lines on it are accurate. They're mostly accurate. There's a little mistakes from Titus Andronicus, but it shows an illustration of a scene that has all the characters that actually isn't in the play. And there's some controversy with it because a Shakespeare forger got a hold of the paint of the picture and tried to mess with it a little bit, but we think we have a lot of the original of it. And it's really interesting illustrations because they're outfits that don't look like anything you'd think would be in Shakespeare. It's not like the puffy pants or anything. It's far more diverse in the illustrations, and we don't quite know what to make of it. But it's this just random piece of paper that was shoved in a book in a random library somewhere that somebody found, and it's like, this seems to be a contemporary illustration of Shakespearean costumes, and it's very different from what the assumption of Shakespeare costumes was. So that's also like a little interesting thing I'd leave you with. And I am done with Tom Teaches Theater.
Teaches Timon of
Tom,
Athens.
Tom teaches Timon of Athens. I really don't want to teach Timon of Athens, but let's get into this. So this play was not produced in Shakespeare's time. There was an adaptation of it. It was rewritten, I think, by Dryden. That was actually somewhat popular.
I thought
For
Middleton worked. Isn't it Middleton who worked on
Oh,
it?
maybe it was
Wasn't it
Middleton
Middleton? I thought it
who
was
did it.
Middleton.
Okay, maybe it was Middleton.
Maybe it might have been Dryden. For some reason, I thought Middleton had worked on it too.
Oh, well, the belief is Middleton worked on the original.
Yeah.
This is
Okay.
kind
Okay.
of a
That's what I thought you
composite
meant.
of
Okay.
Middleton. But Dryden later rewrote the play,
Oh, that I didn't.
wrote
Okay.
his kind of own version based on this, and that kind of tradition, that late 17th, 18th century tradition of adapting Shakespeare. As we know, it doesn't seem to have been performed in his time. A lot of people think it was a rough draft of Lear, like this was what he was doing to get ready for Lear, or people just blame Thomas Middleton for it. In rereading it, I think there's a coherent reading you can make of the play. I think there's some
Yeah.
interesting ideas in the play. I think there are sort of interesting dynamics that maybe aren't explored fully, but they're suggested. I think it's dramatically incredibly boring. But as we've said
Yeah.
before, Shakespeare doesn't do plots particularly well anyway. So if you're looking for a real exciting plot, like it's hard
Yeah.
to
But I mean,
criticize
like,
this for
I mean, you
plot
can't
when
criticize
we
by the
just
plot, but it's
watched Tempest and enjoyed it.
yeah. And I mean, even like, I mean, even Lear. I mean, Lear has the subplot, has more plot, but Lear itself, it's like once he goes out in the storm, he just kind of wanders around and talks to the fools and yells at the wind. He doesn't really do very much. But it's only like an act or two that's actually going on. It's more just like this one's just weird because the beginning, there's a very long build up to his quote unquote fall. I think it's like 2 acts long, right? Before he finally loses all his money and realizes his friends aren't going to help him. And then, once he is living by himself in by the sea or whatever it is, although I like this is another one. So it's like, it takes place by the sea, but and they say his tomb's by the sea. I'm like, but he's in the woods.
Yeah.
He's very clearly not near water. And that was the movie though. But, so um, it's actually 3 acts, I think it is, before he goes outside. So it's 3 acts before he goes outside. But then it's just sort of like he just kind of gets visited by like a bunch of random people. It reminds me, reading it this time, it reminds me either of like a platonic dialogue almost, in that it's like there's a character talking and then someone presents an opposing viewpoint and then they talk about it for a little bit and then they sort of reach a conclusion and then that character walks off the stage. So
Hmm.
it's almost like that, or it has like a Job feel to it, in that
Yeah. Yeah.
he's sitting on his dung heap and people come and sit with him and then he kind of rails at them. Like it sort of has this like anti-Job, like rail against the world, whereas Job is like, I just want my time to defend myself. So but it has this sort of Job feel, but neither of those things. Job is particularly dramatic, and neither is a Platonic dialogue. So there's no drama. Nothing. So it's not just that nothing. It's not just that there's not a great plot. It's just there's no drama.
Hmm. They try to insert that with the coming of Alcibiades,
Yeah.
and it doesn't really work because you don't really see Alcibiades engaging in conflicts of his own.
No.
Timon finds some money, he gives it to Alcibiades. Alcibiades goes off. Later, the senators come on and say, "Hey, can you be on
Talk to
our
else.
side?"
Yeah. Can you
Yeah,
help us out?
I'm not entirely sure why. I guess they assume he can talk Alcibiades down. And then he says no, and they go away, and Alcibiades wins. And then Alcibiades, who normally was fighting, or initially was fighting because he think his friend was wrong, doesn't mention his friend anymore when he conquers Athens, and instead says, "I'm doing this for Timon. we're gonna celebrate Timon now." There you go. So it is. You're right. There is nothing particularly dramatic about it, and what is dramatic, which is you're waiting for something to happen, you're waiting for this conflict to happen, is so obvious that it's not very interesting. You're just like, okay, fine, go broke, go broke, go broke. Let's turn the page. I suppose audiences of his day would be more familiar with the Timon figure. He was a popular figure, this guy who kind of stood outside of Athens and yelled at Athens. Apparently, he was a very common thing to talk about back then. But it doesn't quite translate dramatically. The speeches are not typical of Shakespeare. Shakespeare's speeches, I think, when they're at their best, where you see this with tomorrow, tomorrow, and tomorrow, tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, to be or not to be, or even put out the light, they tend to be what I think Harold Bloom calls overhearing, where he says something or she says something, they hear what they say, and that enters into kind of an argument with themselves or a revelation, and then they build upon that revelation and move to another understanding or to another observation. And so the speeches themselves, they come out almost like arguments. To be or not to be,
Yeah.
it comes out like a beautiful argument. And that's the same
These tend
thing.
to come across more as long, extended metaphors, almost
Mhm.
like let's talk about the moon and how it steals its light from the sun.
Mhm.
And then we're just gonna descant on that
Mhm.
theme for a while.
Yeah, for a while.
For a while.
Timon talks
Like
a lot.
the
Yeah.
moon is an errant thief. It's just like that's the line I always remember from the moon is an errant thief.
Mhm. Yeah. But they don't really go anywhere.
No.
They don't advance anything. They're not necessarily, they're pretty blunt and pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of complexity to the speeches. And so that's also something that you lose in this play relative to other things. You could see why people think this would be a prelude or a kind of rough draft to Lear, right? There's certainly a certain Leariousness to it.
Well, it's very much, I mean, it's again, it's one of those things having now read them all. Shakespeare does do this a lot. Like there's a definite theme. This is why I always go with the who hurt you, William? Like there's this definite theme running through his plays, and it's a lot of a good person who puts their trust who trusts in humanity and puts their faith in the wrong person, and that person turns out to turn on them, and basically they end up destroyed. So this is where I'm like, I don't know whether the biographical reading works, but it does sort of feel like Shakespeare is very bitter at something. Like this is a theme he just it's this is the Iago theme, this is the Cordelia theme, that this happens at Timon of Athens. Like it feels like it even happens in Macbeth, because you have yeah Duncan trusts Macbeth. It's sort of from the other side of it, which is actually really interesting. That he's even, this is a good sign of a good artist. He's got his thing that he wants to explore, and now he can explore it from the other side too, and put his person that is the betrayer in the driver's seat. But it does feel like this is just a constant theme in Shakespeare, that he's just obsessed with people who put their faith and trust in the wrong person. And so this feels just like that theme just absolutely distilled down to it's just rage. It's just pure anger. And I'm just gonna yell at all the people who did bad things to me. So I mean, this feels like a therapy session for Shakespeare. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, it does. That's a good way to put it. It's
Like
just
I'm tired of trying to make, sometimes making my other characters sympathetic and trying to balance and everything like that. I'm just gonna rage, and that's kind of what this feels like.
yeah. I think it is. Maybe that's it. I think there
I don't think
is.
it's actually that. I just think it's,
Well, I think it's a
I
good
think it's a rough,
reading. I
yeah,
think
but I
it's
think
a fair
it's a
reading.
rough draft. I think
Yeah.
but it's a theme that he explores a lot.
Hmm.
Um,
I
so
think in this play there is this kind of sense of. I, I think what's going on here is a sort of Aristotelian mean type thing between, and I don't think Shakespeare normally does this, but between excess and parsimony. And I think that's what you're getting with spending time and the time, the time who's loose with his purse.
yeah, it's magnanimity. It's the
Yeah,
balance between magnanimity and profligacy.
yeah,
You
and
can be magnanimous without being profligate. He's
mhm,
profligate.
mhm. I think that's what he's trying to put on here, and you see that with. But the other extreme is Apemantus, and Apemantus is obviously not an acceptable alternative either. Who's just this kind of cynic who goes around and you know pisses on everything all the time. And so I think he's trying to organize those different ideas. And I think there is in Flavius, the servant character, a sort of respect for moderation that he is trying to cultivate, which is odd because I don't really know what to do with it because I don't think of Shakespeare as the guy who wants to respect moderation, right? I don't think any of his characters are really that way. Like we love Othello because he's sort of bigger than life, and then
I mean, it's the reason
Falstaff,
why you love all of them. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
Falstaff is his greatest creation, and that's just
yeah,
his.
it's just gluttony unbound, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so this idea of like reading Shakespeare and being like, there's this guy in the middle. I was trying like writing down lines from Flavius about you know, about the problems of wealth and if wealth gets into us, then against the stream of virtue they may strive and drown themselves in riot, etc. And you like reading it going like, there seems to be a this guy seems to be like pushing for a kind of sensual moderation that I just don't see a lot in Shakespeare plays. It just, maybe in Henry V has to be a little bit more moderate, but that seems to be kind of what's going on here in terms of the scheme. And I guess you also see that
Is
extended.
this like a product of like, because this is one of his last plays, obviously. Is this like a product of like Puritan, Puritanism,
But
like
he's so
the Puritan is,
anti-Puritan.
but that's what I'm saying
Mhm.
is the Puritan sort of the Appomattus character, and
Mhm.
then sort of the
Oh,
raging against these sort of
mhm.
libidinous other,
Desires. Yeah.
yeah, these, well, the sort of the libidinous, you know gentry sort of thing,
Mhm.
or sort of royalty or whatever it happens to be. I don't think James was particularly libidinous, but
I thought he was. I thought he was a
was he?
bit. I thought
Was he raucous? I don't know if he was.
he wasn't as bad as his son, but I
Yeah.
thought he enjoyed. I thought he enjoyed women who were not his wife.
Okay, could be. I don't know enough about
Yeah.
the
Oh, not
time.
his. I'm sorry, his grandson. His son, on the other hand, was apparently a very, very loyal husband and father. But anyway, yeah, I think James had fun. I think James is a
Okay,
bit of
so
a
then
hard
maybe,
man.
but then maybe that is that what's going on? That there's sort of this like the pure, this is he's trying to do a Puritan thing. Like, okay, we gotta be, we don't need to be the Appomattuses, but we probably shouldn't be the
Throwing our money away.
throwing our money away. But
Yeah,
again,
I
I
don't know
don't.
what was going on then at that time because James wasn't a bad financier.
That's I'm thinking. I don't think that's that. I guess that's what I mean. I don't see him as being a. James isn't, Louis the fifth, 15th or whatever. I was gonna say 15th, because 15th the après moi le déluge, like he's not that. Where he's, Louis the 16th was just clueless. Louis
Yeah.
the 14th was sort of in charge. Louis the 15th seems to have been the like, this is gonna be bad someday, like, and then he's just like, well, we're just gonna party, like, I don't know if that's some of the sense here that's going on.
There is something with the running of the city. Because there is this idea, they mention this early on, that something is going wrong with the Utes of Athens. The Utes of
The
Athens.
Utes?
The
Did
Utes
you
of
say
Athens.
Ute?
And
We got. I love that.
yeah,
Sorry, and I mean,
I
there's
wish there
no
was an
adaptation of it.
adaptation of
That's
something.
what I was gonna say. There's no adaptation of it.
And if they
It's gonna.
remake it, it's gonna suck.
Oh, are they really
So
remaking that? You
no, no,
can't
no, they're
remake it.
not. They're not. I'm saying
Oh,
if we were to do it, it would be a remake, and that would
oh
be
yeah, yeah. No, no,
terrible.
no. But
Um,
yeah. Anyway,
yeah, but if there's
maybe
something
we could
going.
argue it's like a remake of In Cold Blood. We could just do. You could just say it's just
Just to
say it
do it.
is. Just yeah, just
Yeah,
to do it.
yeah. Adaptation without the adaptation. That would be. We got tired of this shit.
Yeah, we got
Um,
time. Okay, time.
yeah, but I mean, there seems to be this like at the beginning, the poet is talking about this, um,
And
and
then it just opens with like poet and artist. Just
yeah, yeah,
like
just general.
I have a poem for him. I hope he'll give me money.
I have a painting for him. I hope he
I was
likes it.
actually I spent when I was looking at these, I went through the plays to see if any of them start with the title character on stage as the first character to show up on a scene. Um, I think when I went through them, I think there was like one or two that might have actually had the title character be on stage. But usually they talk about the title character, and then the title character sort of appears, in the next scene or so.
Yeah, they
Um,
build them up.
but anyway, I just thought it was interesting. I'm like, oh, I wonder if there's anyone. But yeah, this is just like the classic. It's like, oh, we'll just have a poet and a painter. They don't even give them names. But
Yeah,
that's, I
why
mean, this is
bother?
why. Yeah, I mean, it does kind of feel like a rough draft. Like it just feels like. But yeah, so poet and painter complaining about the city.
Yeah, poet and painter. They're yeah complaining about the city. There seems to be a sense of there's something going wrong with the young people in this city. Like that's what I got from reading. There's something going wrong, and that's why Alcibiades is able to kind of just cut through it. Right? Because that's actually what happened, right? Basically, that's the whole Platonic project, isn't it? The Socratic Platonic project is the answer to the Peloponnesian War. It's basically
Yeah.
Alcibiades betrays Athens and takes over. And it's sort of like the question they ask is, well, how did this happen? What has gone wrong? That seems to be a suggestion here in the beginning and in the Senate scene with Alcibiades that something's wrong with the young people of Athens. It's like going to pieces. And it may be that the profligacy of Timon is supposed to be reflected in that of the city. And so the balanced soul of Timon is unbalanced, and it's also unbalanced in this city. Like the political is reflecting the individual. I don't really in that.
Is this just Shakespeare's "Get Off My Lawn" play? Like,
I
is
guess
this is like that's
that's my reading of it. But also, I mean, the problem too is like the Alcibiades scene. Like his argument doesn't make any sense. Like it's a pretty bad argument, isn't it? For
well,
why
his argument is he fought in all your wars, therefore you should let him get away with murder.
yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's a pretty bad argument if you're setting up a play about the destruction of virtue allowing Alcibiades to take over. Right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean it's
it doesn't that argument doesn't work if that's the main problem that inspires Alcibiades, right? It seems like well they act fairly
well, I guess it's just
virtuously in that moment.
their acceptance of corruption is fickle or it's inconsistent. I think maybe that's part of the idea is that yeah, I mean, if these were virtuous men, then for them to make this argument would be potentially acceptable, but they are clearly not virtuous men. So therefore their argument is sort of hypocritical, right? I mean that I think is the only argument that would be the flip side of this is that yes, Alcibiades' argument of he's done good things in the past, you should let him get away with murder is not a particularly good argument. But at the same time, their sort of enforcement of, well, we have to enforce the laws. It's like, but yeah, but you're douchebags. Like, you take money and don't help friends and you're awful people. So you're sort of you're so focused on legality and sort of letter of the law, but your ideas are, or the way you live your lives is corrupting. Like maybe that's the the thing you're supposed to get out of
That's
it.
what you get out of draft two or three when
Yeah, and
yeah.
these are ideas that were supposed to be kind of more properly fleshed out. Or again, maybe Shakespeare was just old and tired and just was like, this is I ain't doing any more for this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that was his that's what's going on here, but it's a
Mm.
pretty yeah, it just feels bare bone. And there's ideas. There are, I mean, these kind of things you can talk about, but it almost just feels like, is it worth talking about them? It doesn't feel like maybe he intended this, maybe he didn't. Is
Mhm.
it just poorly written, or is it in aporia? Like, what is it?
Yeah, I think it feels unfinished. I'll agree. I think it just feels like there's all of these things he needs to work on or develop. Like there seems to be a need to see the senators more, to see the what their relationship with things are, or there seems to be something more with Appomattox maybe. So we get a I don't even know if we need a backstory. I just there needs to be something about the town and the work that Alcibiades is doing that needs to be there. I think we need a little more balance between Alcibiades and Timon, and then the Timon speeches. They really need to be different speeches. The words in the speeches need to be
Right?
different than the words that are in these speeches. I mean, they sound pretty good when you hear them out loud, and as we have, and I was even reading it out loud. It
Yeah.
sounds perfectly fine, but they don't. They're inert.
Yeah, they
They're
don't go
inert
anywhere. Yeah.
poetry, and so you don't really see a range of feelings he has. And in the production we were in, Timon and Apomantus, they sort of come to a sort of what would you call that moment? They hug. They
Yeah.
sort of reach
There's
a moment of emotional exhaustion and they hug in the production we were in. And then they break apart and kind of disgust at that.
yeah, it's
Um,
sort of a moment of human, not contact isn't quite the right word, but sympathy, human
Empathy.
empathy,
I
maybe.
think there's
Yeah,
empathy
just
because
yeah,
I think that's what he was going for in directing that scene was, oh, they're now seeing the kind of torture in somebody else.
yeah.
That would be a development, a movement that brings out different sides of a character.
But that's not even in the
Oh,
play.
it's
I
not in the
mean,
play. No, that was invented for the
yeah,
production
and
we were
it was a
in.
great yeah, the production we did have that, and it was really good. That was one of the great things is when I think I remember my brother coming to see it, and he was like, "Yeah, it was a very long play," and he goes, "That scene was really good. Like the scene between Epimantis and Timon that they sort of manufactured." That's just it's not in the text. But this is one of those things where I say like you can do it. It wasn't a scene that was fighting the text. It's just not a scene that's necessarily in the text, but it didn't fight the text. You know,
No, yeah.
you could legitimately sort of turn it into this moment where they both just kind of yeah melt down in tears in one another's arms and then throw each other away in sort of fear and disgust and then go back to their screaming at one another. And it kind of worked fairly effectively, I thought.
I think it worked effectively too, because that scene in the play is really about who's a poser, who's a bigger poser.
Yeah.
That's what they're arguing about. Are you a poser because you never suffered to become poor? That's what Timon is saying to Appomattox, and Appomattox is like, "Oh, you're trying to be like me now that you're poor." That's it. That's the scene. That's what they're railing about. And some
The
of it's
Holden
clever.
Caulfield kind of scene. Like
Yeah.
it's very like you're a phony.
Yeah. But in the production with us, it was like they reach a point where they see the other person as a reflection of themselves and the damage, and they're able to have a communion, and then that communion breaks apart because it's an impossible thing. If you can write that into the poetry, that's really
That's
cool. And that's really
really
interesting.
good. If you
Yeah.
could make that scene into that, that would be a Shakespearean scene. But that is not what it is. This is why I say it's like Job. Like it reminds me of Job and just his accusers just kind of yelling at him, telling him he's bad, and him going, "No, I'm not." And
Yeah.
then they just okay, well then the next guy's gonna go and then he's gonna tell you about. But that's kind of what this is, like I played one of the thieves
Mhm.
in the second,
And I
sort of
ordered
when
your execution.
you did, yes, you ordered. That was your syphilis show, right?
My syphilis show. My character had syphilis.
Because Al Capone had syphilis. Um, when we did our production was set in like a 1920s kind of like gangster thing, and it was Club Athens, and the senators were all gangsters, and so yeah, the only things I think I did in that show, I danced in Club Athens during Timon's party. I got my throat cut because I was the guy who apparently had murdered someone. And Alcibiades was trying to save my life, but you were the sort of godfather figure and ordered me killed. And then
It's
I
not in the original play audience. Just
no, no, we should be clear on that. And then in the second act, I played one of the thieves who hears Timon has gold and tries to go to rob him, and Timon gives all the golds to them, and then they sort of ironically are like, maybe we should reconsider being thieves because this man's clearly crazy. Um, but so I had that scene, but even that scene is just sort of they arrive, they come to rob him, and then that was the Hoon is an arrant thief, and then he just praises thieves and says you guys should be more thieves and cut throats when you steal, and then they sort of leave being like, this is strange, we should think on this, and then they leave. Like, and
doesn't
then
go anywhere.
it doesn't go
And the
anywhere. There's
scene
no,
pops up in like a random part in Act Four. I think it
yeah.
comes after the Alcibiades, the Appomattox scene. So it's, or maybe the Alcibiades scene.
Well, it's like this is where I just say it's just like the next damn thing.
Mm,
It's just
yeah,
like the next. This is the I think it's the if you're who's I somebody I saw. Oh, it's Trey Parker, I think.
yeah. In South
The,
Park, I know the story. Yeah.
yeah, and he
Mm,
does the like your sequence should not be and then like if your story is just and then it's not a story. It has to be this because of this and then this because of like each thing has to chain into a sequence of events, one causing the other. That makes it a good story. This is just not that, especially the second part where it's just I think it's like Flavius. Is it Flavius shows up at one point?
yes. Hmm.
And then also, but which they cut from the movie, and that's one of the better scenes. It is
Did they?
oh yeah, they got,
Anyway, yeah.
well we gotta get to
We'll
that
get into
movie.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we get to the movie, but
But finish your point. Mhm.
it's just I think it's like Flavius shows up, and then Alcibiades shows up, and then Appomattox shows up, and then the thieves show up, and then I think the senators show up with Flavius again, and there might be someone else who shows up in there. I don't remember, but it's just like a bunch of random people show up, have a conversation with him, and then leave,
And it doesn't do anything.
and they don't do anything.
It doesn't really change timing even.
No, well, this is why I say
Except
it's hand.
Flavius. The Flavius
As I
scene, there's
said,
a little bit of
there's
dimension.
one moment, and that's why I like that sequence because it actually does give him a moment. And the moment is Flavius comes to him and basically says, "I want to be." He's the servant, and he comes
Hmm.
to him and says, "I want to be with you, master, even though you have no money." And the whole thing, Timon has been like, "I am misanthropos. I hate all man." And this one person has shown up, and he does say, he says, "I will grant you one good man," because he realizes that his servant, his sort of head steward, was a good person. It was the only good person that he had been around him, and he says, I will grant ye gods one good man," and that's his sort of. Maybe if you ended the act with that, it could be like kind of
Yeah, that could be interesting because it could build to that.
yeah,
It could build to that. And if you pair that with like an Alcibiades scene or an Appomattox scene, because those seem to be the things that need to happen. You need Flavius, you need Alcibiades, you need Appomattox, and obviously you need the senators because
yeah.
the actually I don't you don't like just have a separate thing with Alcibiades. They don't. It's
They
completely
don't need to go to
weird
Timon.
that
No,
they're like,
there's no
yeah,
need for them to go to
sorry,
Timon.
we need you to
We
like.
need you. I remember even when we did our production, and I think I was like a college freshman. I remember being, I'm like, why do they need him? I think I think I missed this detail. I
Oh
must be
no.
missing this in the language. I'm like, because there seems to be no reason why they would care at all about this guy.
I guess because they're friends, so maybe like talk him down.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's supposed to be the implication is that
they
like
don't really
Timon
say
was
that.
the virtuous man, although he
Mm,
clearly isn't really virtuous. He's just again, he's profligate.
mm.
But he was the good man of Athens and people liked him, and now that he's gone, everything's falling apart. It's
Mm.
like it reminds me of the episode of The Simpsons where Marge goes to prison and like they can't afford their statue of JFK and they have to get their statue of Jimmy Carter instead, and the whole town just goes crazy and starts burning everything down, and they're like, if only Marge Simpson had been here, this would never have happened. And that, it sort of has that feeling to it
Mm.
of if only Timon had been here, it's sort of like, but he didn't do anything. He
And
had
he made
nothing to
things worse,
he
right?
had
I mean, if he's
nothing to
a
do with
like, so
this.
then the point is, well, we need this profligate to ground our society because without him, this is just going to fall apart.
Yeah,
It's a Keynesian argument. It's a Keynesian Shakespeare play. That's what they have. Uh,
we
but
got to talk about this movie. We got
yeah,
to, and by talk about I mean trash.
yeah. So the movie is made by I think amateurs, though.
Probably, I have my theory.
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure. I tried to find an interview with the one or both of the directors, and the directors are Dan Noah and Bramwell Noah. And they also did the adaptation, and also Bramwell stars as Timon.
It shows they needed someone to tell them to stop. But
Yeah. So the conceit of the production seems to be this Australian group got together and decided to do a pseudo expressionistic version of Timon of Athens.
oh, is that what was going on?
I think. I'm not
Oh, I
entirely
didn't. I mean, I guess
sure.
that would make sense to what was kind of going on in the middle. I thought that was just they needed something to pad it, and they just stuck those in there. But maybe that is what's going on.
So it's loyal to the play for about 20 minutes, right?
I mean, loyal in the sense that it somewhat follows the plot. Like, there's got to only be like 25 lines of dialogue.
Yeah, well, it has very little Shakespeare in it. And just to give you a summary before we go at it, after when Timon sits down and at one point in the play he invites all his friends over and he's going to trick them and he is going to serve them dinner, but it turns out to be water and stones. And this is his big declaration of misanthropy. He is now going to leave Athens and live in the woods slash beach. Um,
And up to that point, it's fairly faithful with the plot, to
it's
your point.
faithful, it's just hollow, and it's not particularly good, but whatever, whatever.
It's faithful.
There's no interpretation, I think. I would not say I see an interpretation at that point.
No.
After that, they start a chant. He leads the people at the dinner in a chant. Then they run away, and then we have a long sequence which involves the I guess the people of Athens after they've been slaughtered by Alcibiades' army in what seems to be nonsensical scenes involving characters we haven't been introduced to who are occasionally wandering in a chalk maze or looking at a baby's skull or climbing in a tree or crying in a barn and getting killed for a finger ring.
I didn't understand. Well, some of them, I think the dude with the finger ring,
Was he a senator?
he was one of the ones that they went to ask for money.
Okay.
So was the dude in the fountain. The dude who was dead in the fountain, the one with the pants that were so ill-fitting, I couldn't tell whether it was his butt or his crotch because it was literally, I'm like, is he leaning over that way or is he leaning over the other way? Like, literally, I can't tell which direction. This is what I had to focus on because what else were you going to focus on in this movie? And, he was, I think, so some of them, I think, were the senators. And I think the some of the women, well, at least one of the women, I think they were all women, people who were at the dinner table. I think. Like even the woman who's like climbing the tree or the really, really awkward rape scene. And not awkward like in the way that it's like, oh, this is uncomfortable to watch, but uncomfortable because it was like the guys were very giggly. Like it was, you know what I mean? Like it was just like this feels very weird. It there was just a lot of, but I think that's what was going on. I think it was supposed to be all of the people that were at that dinner being punished, but you don't know who they are.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, we're saying this right now. We're not sure who they were or if they were even at the dinner, right? Like I couldn't remember that blonde lady who had
I
the
think
baby
she was
skull.
there. I'm
Okay.
not positive. But
Hmm.
even then, it's like, why does she have a baby's skull? Like she was holding like a sort of swaddle, and then she's like pulling out dirt, right, from it, and then she pulls out a baby's skull. I'm like, I mean, I guess the implication is supposed to be that she dug up a dead baby, but why and where did it come from? Like, and yeah, it was just sort of like one of these things where I'm like, are they trying to just establish images, but I don't get them? It was just like really confusing, and even the like scene with this is so one of my theories of the movie. There's a lot of scenes of just like extended no dialogue. Right? You know, like even the scene with like the guy in the woodshed, like they go to kill the guy in the woodshed and it takes them forever. Like they just slowly take his like purse and then slowly take his ring. And then I was just like, okay, now they'll kill him. And then they're like, no, they like throw him back in the woodshed and then they like threaten him more. And then one of them just picks up like a big log. And then I'm like, oh, I guess they'll beat him to death, but then they didn't. Like I think the implication was supposed to be that he was being sodomized, right?
Oh, I didn't get that, but sure.
I think that's what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, because he is screaming after that. No.
Yeah, he's just screaming and he's just kind of standing there, but I'm like, but that was like a 10-inch diameter log. Like this isn't how it just like that wouldn't work very well. It would be basically just like the mechanics aren't there. So there was it just didn't make any
You're just
sense.
spanking him at this point.
But they weren't, but that was the thing is that's why I was kind of waiting for, but they didn't show any motion.
Hmm.
That's why I think the
Yeah, I didn't pick
implication
up on the sodomy thing at
well, it was the
all.
only thing I could think because the guy just starts screaming while they're just standing there holding a log, but they're not hitting him with it.
I thought because they moved back with the camera, so I
But
thought,
you could still see him
yeah,
back there. It was
yeah.
just blurry. Like they
Hmm.
just kind of blur. Like the guy who's whoever this was clearly thought the cinematographer thought he was really clever with his lens work, and so he would just like pull back. It was like he was trying to be like Orson Welles, and he sort of has this like deep focus shot where it was like the person in the front is in focus, and then the person behind them is sort of blurry. But that was why I was like, they show him blurry behind them, and then they show the soldier standing there and just and then the guy just starts screaming. But I'm like, but it's very I can still see them blurrily not moving, so he can't be beating him with the log. So what else is he doing with this
Hmm.
log? It was just like one of these things. I'm like, I don't get what you're trying to suggest is going on here. But
Oh,
they
maybe he's beating him with the log, but he just never did the motion.
I mean, I guess that's also possible. It's just as illogical as sodomizing with a 10-inch log. Like, none of this makes any sense. This whole
Yeah.
thing made no sense. I was just like trying to put it together. But they had these very long sequences with no dialogue. So my theory is that the director was like when he was in film school, they had like a master class taught by like somebody came in and it was like a master class and it was like the guy who directed like 51st Dates or something, and he came in and was like, I'm gonna do a master class, and he watched their films and gave them notes, and this guy, his note to him was like, yeah, you were really courageous because you let your actors do the work in this one scene, and you didn't have any dialogue, and you let the scene sit quietly while they did the work, and that was really courageous of you. And he was like, yeah, this is my thing. Like this is what I'm gonna do in my movies. Wes Anderson will have little dioramas, and Alfred Hitchcock will insert himself as a cameo, and I'm going to have really, really long scenes that don't do anything. Well, I just have a shot of a person's back. Like there's literally the film opens with just the shot of a woman's back over her shoulder as like someone very far away very slowly walks towards them. It was like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
For a movie that's only an hour and 20 minutes, that's a significant percentage of your film.
Yeah, or I know there's a lot the scene in the beginning where he counts out the money for either the poet
It's the jeweler. It's for
the
the
jewel, oh, it's
jeweler.
the jeweler.
It's for the
Yeah, he
jeweler.
asks for one coin He doesn't ask. He signals for it because there's no dialogue. They get the coin. Yes, he signals for another one,
And then everyone goes,
then another one.
oh,
Then he
like,
gives the coins back, and then he takes the purse, and then he hands the purse to. It goes on for what it must go on for like 90
yeah,
seconds.
it's probably about 90 seconds, yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Which
a
again,
gag.
for a movie that's only an hour and 20 minutes,
Yeah.
that's a significant percentage of your movie is
Mm.
watching someone count. Like, this is not how movies work.
Yeah.
So the other great one I love, which again, this is more just a blooper. They have the Alcibiades who's played by a woman, fine, and they have her throwing a javelin at one point, and it's supposed to clearly be like her prowess, and they show her hurl it, and it goes like sideways, it kind of wobbles and falls down 6 feet away, and that's the scene they kept. I was like, you couldn't even cut that out. Like,
Couldn't ever get you just keep throwing javelins until you accidentally get
did you
a
accidentally get one? It's not like I mean, like it's not that hard to throw a javelin straight.
Mhm.
It's like, oh
Yeah.
man,
And the scene too where the she pleads for the life of the man um who killed the person. First of
apparently
all,
because of a apparently because of a menage a trois,
yeah, apparently he did not know he was in a menage a trois.
which
That's
again took like that sequence must have been 3 or 4 minutes
yeah.
of just watching a man wake up, groggily reach for a bottle of wine, not be able to get the bottle of wine open, then try to take a drink from the bottle of wine, then turn to the woman who was sleeping next to him, try to take a bottle of wine from her, have her move away while holding the bottle of wine, and then finally realize that there's another man in the bed. And I'm like, my God, this is is taking
Yeah.
forever for a scene that doesn't need to happen.
You need the scene though because you need to see the killing, right?
Why? Shakespeare
I guess
doesn't
you
have
don't,
it.
yeah.
Shakespeare
It
doesn't have it.
and it also
You just
ruins
know the guy committed
things.
a crime.
Yeah. It also ruins things because he doesn't kill in self-defense anymore.
No.
He murders the guy when the guy's back is turned to him because he's jealous because he unintentionally was in a menage a trois.
Why? Yeah, it's like,
So
and the
he's
whole argument Alcibiades makes is it was done in self-defense. I'm like, but it clearly wasn't done in
wasn't done.
self-defense. The man was
We
naked in
know.
his own bed. That is
Not
not going to
looking
hold
at
up in
you.
court.
Yeah. Yeah. And then so it's bizarre. So it ruins Alcibiades completely. The credibility of that character is gone. She's now just defending whomever.
I mean, her
And
credibility is gone because at the end of the movie, when she goes to murder someone, she walks around with the knife literally behind her back, where everyone behind them can see it and yell out a warning.
uh that's and then in the scene he's in the scene in the senator scene and she she's pleading for him and then said no you're going to die and then the scene ends with her slapping him slapping the guy who she was defending before so you just get no sense of like is the what are we supposed to feel about Alcibiades and then that's the guy who's going around torturing people right isn't he the guy who like kills a bunch of people afterwards.
I wasn't sure. I couldn't quite tell. They kind of all looked a little bit alike, so I wasn't positive on that.
I think he's the one male soldier and everybody else was female. That was my.
I thought there was another male soldier, but again, I'm unsure. I mean, this is just the like, it was so poorly told as a story, and the sequences were just so long with no dialogue that it just made no sense. I mean, it was just like filmmaking error after filmmaking error. I mean, I also loved there's the sequence with Timon sitting by the firelight when they're all sitting by the firelight. I'm like, I mean, again, I get it's just so like a low budget film, but then don't film at night by a fire. I couldn't even see him. Like you light,
Mm,
because
mm.
normally you would light the scene, suggesting you can still have the fire there, but the fire is just a practical. It's not actually the light source for the scene. You're supposed to have other lights there so you can see them, but they didn't. So they just had the fire. And then you just got Timon kind of sitting back there, like ranting you can't see his face or most of his body. So it was just like, this scene isn't working very well. Like it was just
Yeah, it's a very strange attempt at the play. The I have to mention. Did you see the post credit scene?
oh yeah, yeah.
it's so the post-credit scene is, I think that's the woman with the baby head, right?
It was the woman with the baby
With
head.
the
Yeah,
woman with the baby
that was
head.
the baby head woman. I
That's
think
not,
she's also the woman who was raped.
is she also the woman who was raped? Can
I
you
think she's the woman
see
who was
the
raped.
face of the woman, or is it just blonde? I don't
I'm looking.
remember being able to see her, but whatever. Yeah, sure. But anyway, so the post credit scene, which happens in two, it's almost kind of cut in two parts, is her climbing a tree. Well, we're not sure who she is, but she's
Very slowly
very
climbing a
slowly
tree.
climbing a tree. Then we cut to this movie is not in, this is not based on real people. Any imitation is unintentional. And then it's back to the tree. We see a tree branch break, and then it cuts to her in a full bathtub with a noose around her throat. And then she seems to be drowning, but then she opens up her mouth and starts coughing up blood. And that's how
Yeah,
the movie ends.
that's how it ends.
So, so a woman we're not sure who she is in a in an end credit scene climbs a tree and then maybe dies, but they suggest three different ways she could
She
die, but we're
dies.
not sure.
Not even sure who she is. I'm assuming she's dead based on the preponderance of methods of death, but I don't know who she is, how she died, why she died,
Why
why I
she's
should care that she died. Like,
I mean initially I was watching and I just thought this is gonna end because it just has her in the tree and then it cuts to that thing that all movies end with, which is this is not based on anything real, any likeness to real characters is purely accidental. And so I thought at that point, I'm like, the end credit sequence is a woman climbing a tree very slowly. That's what they're gonna end on. I don't even know who she is.
there's a lot of mistakes were made.
Mistakes are made.
The only one of them who can actually do the Shakespearean verse. This is the thing that I think because they're all the Timon guy can't do Shakespearean. I mean, he sounds like it's like a vacuum cleaner salesman reading Shakespeare. Like it's really bad. But the only one who can do it is Flavius. He actually, I'm guessing, has spent some time doing Shakespeare verse because he actually could do it. Like he knew how to speak it, he knew how to write it, he knew how to actually deliver those lines. That was the only thing that was actually like, oh, yeah, he's pretty good. Which is why I was disappointed that they cut the one good Flavius scene. The only thing they give him is like he talks to Timon is like you shouldn't kill all the people because some of them are innocent. They give him like the one line that I think is like a senator's line at the end, and they give him that. That's all he's got.
They do cut that scene, right? Where he comes to visit him
Yeah, they just
in the
cut it entirely.
fire. Yeah. What is the scene where we can't see Timon? What are they talking about in that scene?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I don't remember. Um,
I think I'd kind of zoned out at that point.
yeah,
It's not the Epimantis scene, although Epimantis is there. Oh, it's the go. Is it the go hang yourself scene?
maybe.
It might be the I have a tree,
Hmm.
which is actually a good. I mean, that's a good joke. You know, it's like Timon is like this. The senators are like, "You need to come save us," and he goes, I will tell the people how they can save themselves." And he says, like, "I have a tree that I'm going to cut down soon." Maybe that was what the tree breaking at the end was supposed to be a reference to.
Does them? Yeah.
Because then and he says I have a tree, I'm going to cut it down soon, my needs require me to cut it down, and I'll tell you if anybody wants to, you know, save themselves or all the pain that they'll suffer when Alcibiades comes, they should come here, and ere I cut down my tree they should hang themselves from it. um and then he says that and then they're like leave him alone, he is mad, and that was kind of it. I think it's that scene that's by the firelight.
Maybe that is maybe what's going on in the end of it is that somebody is trying to follow his advice.
But why do they I don't know why she falls into a bathtub at the end.
Yeah, and she doesn't even drown. Apparently, she just bleeds out from
Bleeds
some
out
internally.
something.
Well,
If
it's from
some,
her mouth, so it must be an internal injury that's not related
yeah,
to drowning or
yeah,
hanging.
because that's not how drowning works.
No, you don't
So
vomit blood.
no, so I don't know if, but I think now
Maybe what they're
just
going for, yeah.
mentioning that scene, I think it's supposed to be some sort of meaningful reference to that particular sequence, but it's so divorced from actual meaning or significance that it's just hollow. Like it seems to reference that speech, but in no coherent way. And it doesn't necessarily have to be coherent to if it really were a sort of surrealistic, expressionistic thing, but I don't think that's what's going on. I think it's just surreal because it's poorly cut. Like
Maybe that's
like
it.
how a dream is doesn't tend to flow very well, and so this is just poorly cut.
Yeah, my thought with it was just because that's maybe why they cut almost all of the lines. They cut the script down and they just had visuals. My thought was, oh, this is going to be visuals of or what this is visuals of a city after a war. This is just,
Yeah,
this is the destroyed city. This is why she's walking in that space, that kind of,
it's the Shark Cathedral
yeah,
place. I
that
think
like it.
it's the Shark Cathedral thing, like the labyrinth on the floor of Shark Cathedral. I don't know how faithful it follows it, but I think that's pretty clearly what it's
What they're
suggesting.
going for. Yeah, that there's there's the baby head. There's the sort of people getting killed in barns or whatever. It just seems like this is the end of the world for these people. Like I thought it was just images of a land after a war. That's what I thought they were going for.
I mean, I think you're right. That is what they were going for, but that's not what Timon is. So that's sort of, I mean, and that's why I think they got stuck with no dialogue because they were
Do all the
trying to make
stuff
a
that's not
different
in time and
movie. Yeah, they
yeah,
were trying to make a different movie. And so when they're showing all those other scenes, I'm like, these scenes have nothing to do with Timon of Athens. These are scenes out of Cold Mountain. So like this like some bad war movie. Like that's sort of what the feeling was.
yeah. Oh, I forgot about that movie.
Yeah, Cold
Um,
Mountain was really bad.
it was
It's
really
like
bad. Yeah, I just remember.
that's why I figured it was an appropriate
It
example.
was. Yeah, I just from that movie, the only clear memory I have of it is Jude Law kissing Nicole Kidman's bare ass. It was in one of these like awkward love scenes. I
Yeah,
just
I
remember
kind of do
watching
remember
that going,
that.
yeah, just going
Yeah.
like, ugh.
It's definitely
What
a
a
lot. Yeah.
yeah, it's not a but so I think we can maybe wrap up this film. I have nothing much else to
Yeah, I mean,
say.
I think the basic just is why the only reason we finished with this movie was because we both were in it and it's hilarious that it's
Yeah,
just,
it's bad Shakespeare. Bad Shakespeare
yeah,
is definitely worth your time because
it's worth your time because even he made really bad stuff.
yeah, and it's also you might find there is some gems and possibilities in there. But it's also just like yeah, you can see an author at his worst and it's pretty informative or it's pretty interesting. Anyway, but this is our end of season episode.
Done with Shakespeare.
Done with Shakespeare. So what did you think of Shakespeare?
That was fun. Like I
Yeah.
think I've got some ideas. I think the only way you can do Shakespeare really to do it well, if you're gonna do like the adaptations where it's like you're gonna modernize it, you can't do you gotta do one which is like it kind of takes the material and it jumps with it, but it's not as if it's trying to do one for one for one for one for one. Sort of like a 10 Things I Hate About You. Like they pulled that off. But if you try to do a one for one kind of thing, like the Macbeth, the what was that? The diner. What was that? Pennsylvania
Oh,
one.
Scotland, PA.
Scotland, PA. If you're gonna do like Scotland, PA kind of thing, the joke doesn't carry through. So those ones don't work. So you can do those. And if you're gonna do an actual adaptation, you gotta rock. Like you gotta move fast. And any sort of self-indulgent kind of stuff is gonna really fail fast. So if you move quickly through the text, respect the text, and go fast, and you can make a good Shakespeare film. That's what I've learned.
Yes, it's odd. They don't, in traditional cinematic language, I would say Shakespeare doesn't adapt naturally.
No.
It's really awkward. I think that Olivier did it, but Olivier did it almost with respect to theatrical conventions. Branagh does it for the same reasons in Hamlet. I don't think it's particularly theatrical. It's much more cinematic and Much Ado About Nothing. But Much Ado About Nothing is also, if you get the right setting, it seems to make up for that.
Well, it's not, but it's theatrical, but it's not theatrical in the sense that it's literally just like two people talking in this place, and then two people talking in the next place, and then two people talking in the next place. Like it's just each one of those things is just a scene change. It's just a really fancy scene change, right? So I would say he's still very theatrical, not cinematic, in that sense.
Yeah, but you can use the language of cinema there because he chooses such a beautiful spot.
Yeah,
He uses so he's able to incorporate the cinematic language there. And with Hamlet, it feels like a stage play
that could be a
with
stage play.
that could be
It
a
could be.
stage play, but
That's the
it's just
greatest
documenting.
he's just got the greatest stage ever because he can change his set without ever having to move flats. He can just be like, and now we're in a side room, and now we're back in the throne room, and now we're back in the side room, and now we're over in this end of the room, and now we've got mirrors here. It's very theatrical. He just can change the set without having to actually move anything.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel like a BBC
Yeah.
put on. The BBC did all of the Shakespeare plays
Yeah. It's not like
on video.
it's not like the Othello. Like Othello felt very much like just a filmed play.
I'm not sure it's kind of what it
Kind
was.
of what it was,
Mm.
so that felt like a filmed play.
The exception, I think, for all of this tends to be Orson Welles. Chimes at Midnight
Oh
is
yeah,
very
that's
different. It is not one of these things that just you're not getting on the horse and riding. It has a lot of breath. It has a lot of life. It's not, I would say he respects the verse, but he is not a slave to it by any
yeah.
means. He's doing what he wants with it. And it is, I think it's the best adaptation that we saw. I think Hamlet's the best
Yeah, him.
respect for Shakespeare that we saw. But I think in terms of a film, just the film qua film, in terms of quality, I think Chimes at Midnight has it.
If it, I mean, yeah, I would say the Hamlet's the best production of a Shakespeare play in film, which is different than saying it's an adaptation. It's the best production of the play on film. Chimes of Midnight probably is the best adaptation. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think it even works. I think his Othello works well also, even though I don't think he's particularly masterful Othello.
He's not particularly good Othello, and it's got flaws, but it's a good
It's,
movie.
yeah, it's a good movie.
If he probably hadn't had to film it over like 5 years and he had some money and he might be able to pull it
It
off
didn't
better.
lose his Desdemona halfway through.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not a problem of style or concept. And when you
No,
see him being able to do what he wants to do, such as in the opening, it's
that opening is brilliant.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Wells seems to have found a sort of cinematic language that that is making Shakespeare, that makes Shakespeare.
And again, Branagh has it too in Henry V, I would say. Henry V is
Hmm.
pretty cinematic.
I think Brown has it, and I think Olivier has it in Henry V too. I think they
Yeah,
both,
they both do. Yeah.
yeah, they
I
both.
think the three of them have the best handle on how to take Shakespeare and actually put him on film. That Kurosawa one is also brilliant, but that's a different story.
It's a different animal.
It's a different animal, but that's also really good.
Hmm.
Um,
I think what it is there's, I really like the Hamlet of Branagh too. I know you, I
yeah,
think you like it less well than I do, but
I liked it a lot more when I watched it again. I think it's actually a lot better than I remembered it being.
and I
Not that I
think
thought it was bad, but I think it actually is the best one of his plays of his movies.
mhm, of Olivier's movies.
Oh, Olivier's though we're talking about Branagh.
Oh, did I say Branagh? I think
Oh yeah,
Olivier's
Olivier's
Hamlet.
Hamlet I wasn't a big fan of. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
Olivier's Hamlet I wasn't a big fan of. No.
I like that, and I think it worked with the kind of expressionistic Elsinore. It was, a very interesting castle design. However, that could also be done on stage. You could
Yeah,
do a sort of expressionistic castle like that or setting like that on stage. But with the Henry V's, there seems to be a clear nod to this was a stage work and we are going to deliberately move it out
into
of
film. Yeah.
the stage and into film as sort of passing off the torch. So that works really well for both of them. And it seems just that Orson Welles is just doing something different. He is much, much more interested in Shakespeare as a inspiration point for his own thing, whatever that is. Because I would not turn to Wells for like beautiful articulations of the text, even though
No.
Gielgud is great. It's great to have a document of Gielgud doing anything. I was even happy that Gielgud was in Prospero's books, even though, my God, my God, my God, it's always good to have that document. But Wells is just he's not doing Shakespeare; he's using Shakespeare to do Wells, which
Yeah,
is fine, and it
which is
actually
fine.
works really, really well. Like Chimes at Midnight is maybe one of my favorite movies. It's got to
Chimes
be,
at Midnight is still a
yeah,
phenomenal movie. Even if it
yeah,
wasn't Shakespeare, that would be a really, really good movie.
yeah. And there seems to be really kind of nothing wrong with that if you could do it well or if you have your own style. I think that what I like about Shakespeare is what somebody like Branagh gives me, which is a lot of the verse really well done and there, right? That's what's so intriguing about his Hamlet is not just it looks great, but the uncut Shakespeare is
He's
really
brilliant.
glorious.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really, really good.
Yeah, and reading all these plays. So we read 17 Shakespeare plays in the last 18 weeks, I think. You've read more, I
I
think,
read them
right?
all.
You've read them all, yeah. I've
Read them
only read,
all.
yeah, this I've only read less than half that in the same time period. But there is what I think of, what we come to, what conclusion we seem to come to is that with Shakespeare, like the plot just doesn't matter.
No.
Right? It just doesn't matter. The it doesn't even make sense. It doesn't have to make sense. What's great about it is, for me anyway, is that these are some of the most intriguing characters ever. Right? Setting is there to enhance the characters. The setting isn't particularly interesting on its own. The plots
The only one
aren't.
that has a good setting really is Lear and Macbeth.
Yeah,
I like Macbeth. I like them when I like with the witches and going out on the heath and that kind of
yeah,
stuff, and Lear going out into the caves with the wind and that kind of stuff. The rest of them, it's like whatever. It's a
yeah. It's a
it's a castle or a
kingdom.
room.
Yeah, yeah. The setting isn't that particularly interesting. Maybe Midsummer. Midsummer
Yeah,
has
I
kind
guess
of its own
Midsummer, and
thing
maybe you can
going.
make the argument as you like it. Maybe
Yeah, and as
The
you like
woods
it.
kind of is
Well, yeah, when
important,
they
but
go out into nature, he
yeah,
uses nature as a sort of transformative space. That's usually interesting.
yeah. But
But
those are interesting. But for the most part, pretty
you're
basic. They're
yeah,
just rooms.
you're
A
there
room and
for
a
these
room and a
characters.
room and a room and a car and a room and a car and a room.
Yes, hard day's night. But you're there really for these characters, these kind of immense characters, for these kind of larger than life personalities. And I know it's sort of an overstatement that Harold Bloom makes that Shakespeare invented personality. That's his argument that he kind of keeps putting forward.
Sounds like a Harold Bloom
It
argument.
sounds like a Harold Bloom argument. It's a little over the top. It's very grand. I see where he is coming from, even though I don't agree with it. I don't think personality did not exist before 1600, and this
Yeah,
guy
I mean,
came along and invented it.
go read, Canterbury
Chaucer.
Tales.
Yeah.
Yeah, Canterbury Tales. That's what I
Mm.
was,
Yeah,
go read
yeah,
Canterbury Tales. They've got personality. That's I
yeah.
would agree. You go and read a lot of Greek tragedies. Maybe he means on stage because, like, yeah, Greek tragedies don't have a lot of
Hmm.
personality.
I don't think he does. I think he means like he invents
Yeah, he's wrong.
particular deep human beings.
Yeah, no,
I
he's
do
wrong.
think he's wrong, but I understand where he's coming from.
Yes.
Because that's what's the genius of the canon of Shakespeare is there is just a diversity of personalities, and it's not only a diversity of personalities of different personality types, it's a diversity of like really smart people. Like Falstaff and Hamlet are really different people, but they're both really, really
Really smart. Yeah.
smart.
Even Richard. Richard is really smart.
Richard is
Richard's
really smart.
really clever.
Hmm. Yeah, and even like Richard the I know we didn't do Richard the Second, but he's deep in his empathies or in his maybe not his empathies, but in his sort of emotional woundedness or something like that. There's a sort of deepness. He has this sort of understanding of power that is,
Pathos he's deep in pathos. I don't know.
I guess, yeah, deep in pathos. He has this odd thing where he can't wield power correctly, but he understands its consequences. But it's like he can see this thing and see it for what it is, but he can't do anything productive with it. He keeps like screwing it up. Um, and even somebody like Hotspur, who when he dies in Henry the Fourth,
Yeah.
Part One, like he makes his great
He's got a
speech
great
about it.
death speech. Yeah.
Yeah, which is it's suddenly he's not this um, hot-headed, you know, quick to violence character anymore. He's something else. It kind of develops as he talks, and there's that kind of sense in Shakespeare reading him, and when he's at his best is these people develop themselves. They're talking, they're talking, they're talking, and then they change by virtue of them talking to themselves or talking to somebody else. And it's not, I guess, particularly dramatic to do that because you wouldn't want if you're somebody who's writing a play and goes, my character is going to change by talking to himself until he discovers he can change by his own words.
I mean, that would be the, it would be like, the like, you talking to me, and then having that speech have him turn into a pacifist as he sits there talking to the
Yeah.
mirror and be like, what the hell? It is this whole thing watching him get angry.
You
Now he's
need
gonna
to
stop.
like yeah, you need to slam into conflict and change from the conflict.
Yeah.
That's normally how you do things. That doesn't seem to be the case in Shakespeare. It's a really different type of art that he does, in which people kind of make themselves. I think that was the impression I got from reading these things is these characters sort of make themselves through this immense and complex internal reflection. And that's what I took away from this time of reading Shakespeare, this period we had to read Shakespeare. And it's so interesting because I'm teaching somehow, don't ask audience, I'm somehow teaching a playwriting class right now because I got hired mid-year because they needed somebody. So like, please just
Yeah.
take this. Yeah. And so as a person who's never written a play, am teaching this class to
Oh, you're fine.
yeah, to Japanese students who don't speak English particularly well, so they don't notice how bad I am at my
So
job.
I'd say that. I mean, more of a reason why they're not gonna
Yeah,
notice. You're
it's
good.
so funny. I had to explain the plot of Waiting for Godot to them the other day.
God.
It was the funniest thing. The immense confusion that was in that room. But anyway, the things you teach are things like it's
That, that play is a great play, but it doesn't think it translates very well.
yeah, my thought was while I was doing Waiting for Godot was like, okay, how do you write a character who needs to pursue a goal when you're in an absurdist world, right? Like
Yeah,
here everything is gonna be stripped away. There's nothing familiar you can hang on to. Yet, let's read these characters. Are they pursuing goals in a way that is something we
trying to
saw
get
in other
new
plays?
shoes, and you get new
Yeah,
shoes. Like all right,
exactly.
how do you get a new shoe?
So even when you want to go weirdo, you still need these building blocks of standard playwriting. You need objectives, you need a climax, you need a super objective, you need a major dramatic question, and blah blah blah. So all the stuff we teach or I teach, it's not really why I'm reading Shakespeare,
No,
right? Like a lot of it, like we saw this with The Tempest, where it's just like the the major dramatic question is, will Prospero get off the island? It's like, obviously, there's no
will Caliban manage to kill him? Like, no, we're
no.
pretty good on that.
Yeah, we know immediately this one. I love the observation you made of, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Forgot about the
Yeah,
assassination
mission
attempt. Let me
attempt.
go handle that now. Like it was his taxes he forgot about. But so there's no a lot of the best plays, there's no real conflict. Or even with Hamlet, where it's just like, will he, won't we, will he, won't we? And it's like you're like, I don't not really why
Doesn't
I'm
matter.
watching this. Yeah, it doesn't matter. And when he does, it seems to pop out of nowhere. It just seems to be, like watching people come into a fuller realization of themselves, which is something nobody should ever imitate, but it works wonderfully here. And maybe that's why he has endured and probably will continue to endure Shakespeare, is that no one does that type of thing. And yet it's eminently stageable. These plays are still very popular. They're
Still
staged
very
all the
popular. Everyone does
time.
them. Shakespeare in the Park are wildly popular.
Yeah.
Wildly.
And if you know how to use the verse,
Yeah,
you'll be entertaining. Like they don't
yeah.
have to be high concept. If somebody knows how to perform Shakespeare,
They're very understandable. Like
yeah.
I've been to a lot of the Shakespeare's in the Park in New York City, and they're pretty good with the verse. And it's just like eminent. I saw Hamlet in the park like in like 2008, and it was fine. It wasn't a great production, but it was
I saw
good. I
that
mean,
too with Sam Waterston.
oh yeah, Sam Waterston was Laertes. Oh my
Hmm.
gosh, I totally forgot about that. You're right.
Oh, he's Polonius, I thought.
Polonius, excuse me. Yeah, Polonius. Yeah, the father. Oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that. Yeah, he was. That was a good production. That he was good. I mean, again, it was fine. It wasn't great, but it was fine. And the thing is that, but people loved it. Like people sat through it, and it's not just because it's like, ah, I should sit through this. It's Shakespeare. It's good for me. Like people are entertained. I saw Taming of the Shrew there. I saw a whole bunch, but I was seeing like Taming of the Shrew, like all these things, and they work. People laugh. Like they're funny. They're just good, and it's like you couldn't do that with a lot of other playwrights. Just take a play of theirs every year and put on two of them and have people go see them. You're not going to do it with Eugene O'Neill. No one's going to go see Eugene O'Neill in the park every year
Yeah.
and stand outside starting at 6 a.m. to get
And
tickets every year.
there's more O'Neill plays than Shakespeare plays.
Yeah, and but you're not. No one's going to do that. No one's going to sit through two of those a summer. And it's amazing how I don't think any playwright could do that. And yet his plays just they all work. Generally, they don't all work, but you can keep doing it.
Yeah, so audience, stay tuned. In 2 weeks, we'll have our new opening episode for our new season. We're going to be looking at Nobel Prize winners. So, adaptations of Nobel Prize winners.
We should be
So,
clear, even the bad Nobel Prize
oh,
winners. You're not gonna
apparently,
have all of
especially the
them.
Nobel.
Yeah, you're gonna have
Yeah.
all of them.
We are going to do a very long project looking at as many Nobel Prize winners as we can find adaptations for.
Yeah. Having now read all the Shakespeare's, I'm gonna try to read something by every Nobel Prize winner and have already reasonably far underway. So it's gonna
Yes,
be
it's going to be painful, but
some of them are bad.
some of them are bad. Yeah.
It's gonna be fun.
It's going to be fun, though, ultimately. So, audience, stay tuned for season 5, and we will see you then.
Wow, Talking Studios.
Tom teaches theater. Tom teaches Timon's theater.
Time teaches time in theater.
Tom
Uh,
teaches Timon's theater. Tom teaches theater about Timon of Athens.
oh God, yeah.